Two people start eating once a day on the same Monday morning. Same goal, same protocol, same 1 hour eating window every evening. 8 weeks later, one of them has lower inflammation markers, measurable autophagy activation, and has lost primarily fat. The other has lost the same amount of weight, but a significant portion of it is muscle. Their LDL cholesterol is elevated. Their morning blood sugar is worse than before they started, and their cortisol levels have been chronically elevated for 2 months, quietly directing their body to store more fat around the abdomen. Same protocol, completely different outcomes. The difference between those two people isn't willpower. It isn't even what they ate. It's 3 specific details that determine whether one meal a day is the most powerful metabolic intervention a healthy adult can apply, or one of the most efficient ways to accelerate the exact damage it's supposed to reverse. It'll tell you exactly what those 3 details are before this ends. But first, you need to understand what happens inside the body hour by hour when you compress all your eating into a single window, because what's happening at hour 17 is something that no 16/8 study has ever measured, and it changes the entire conversation about fasting. Think of your body under OMAD as a construction site that receives 1 delivery per day. Every material the workers need, protein for structural repair, glucose for energy, micronutrients for enzymatic function, arrives in a single truck at a specific time. The workers have 23 hours between deliveries to do their work with what they have. If the delivery is well stocked and arrives at the right time, the construction site runs efficiently. The workers build, repair, and optimize during the long overnight window. If the delivery is poorly stocked, arrives at the wrong time, or is more than the workers can process at once, they start dismantling existing structures to use as raw material. Load-bearing walls get cannibalized. The building deteriorates while looking like construction is happening. That's the difference between the two people who started on the same Monday. Here is what actually happens, hour by hour. Hours 0 to 4, right after eating. The moment food enters the system, insulin spikes. With a full day's worth of calories arriving at once, that spike is significant, larger than what any 16/8 protocol produces. mTOR activates. Protein synthesis begins. This is the anabolic window, and under OMAD, it is compressed into a narrow window of intensity rather than distributed across the day. The critical issue here, research by Arata et al., published in the Journal of Physiology in 2013, demonstrated that distributing protein intake across multiple meals optimizes muscle protein synthesis compared to consuming the same total amount in fewer feedings. The mechanism is a ceiling effect. Muscle cells can only absorb and use a limited amount of protein for synthesis at one time. Everything beyond that ceiling is either burned for energy or excreted. Under OMAD, you're trying to push a full day's protein requirement through that ceiling in a single pass. Hours 4 to 12, the transition. Insulin starts falling. The body begins shifting from glucose oxidation toward fat oxidation. Glycogen stores, the body's emergency glucose reserve in the liver and muscles, begin depleting. By hour 12, glycogen is running low. This is where the 16/8 protocol operates. For most people, this is the edge of what they call the fasting window. Under OMAD, hour 12 is the midpoint. Hours 12 to 18, where it gets serious. By hour 14, insulin is at its lowest point. AMPK, the cellular energy sensor that signals scarcity, is now fully elevated. mTOR, which was active during the eating window, is now suppressed. And this is the switch that matters most. When mTOR is suppressed and AMPK is elevated simultaneously, autophagy activates at a level that shorter fasting windows cannot reach. Autophagy is the cellular recycling system, the process by which cells dismantle and remove damaged proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, and accumulated cellular debris. A 2010 study measuring autophagy markers in neurons found significant activation at the 24-hour fasting mark. Elevated AMPK, suppressed mTOR, increased LC3II, the proteins that mark the activation of the autophagy pathway. Markers that are present at hour 12 but reach a different magnitude at hour 18. This is also the window where growth hormone surges. Research shows growth hormone increases by approximately 115% during extended fasting, roughly doubling. Growth hormone during fasting is protective. It signals the body to preferentially burn fat rather than catabolize muscle during the extended low insulin state. This is one of the primary mechanisms that makes OMAD different from simple calorie restriction. The growth hormone surge provides a degree of muscle protection that a calorie-restricted 3-meal diet does not generate. Hours 18 to 23, the territory most fasting protocols never reach. This is where OMAD separates from every other fasting protocol. The body is now operating on fat oxidation and ketone production. Ketones are crossing the blood-brain barrier, providing an alternative fuel source for neural tissue. The autophagy process is running at full capacity. Cellular cleanup is happening at a depth that requires this duration. And this is also where the problem begins for the person who doesn't know the three details. Here is what the Stoat et al. Study found, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2007, one of the most cited controlled trials on OMAD. Participants who ate one meal per day lost weight, but they also showed elevated cortisol, unfavorable changes in morning glucose tolerance, increases in blood pressure, increases in LDL cholesterol. Cortisol at hour 23 is not the same as cortisol at hour 12. Extended fasting chronically elevates cortisol, and chronically elevated cortisol does something that contradicts everything people doing OMAD are trying to achieve. It signals the body to store fat preferentially around the abdomen. The same protocol that is supposed to reduce visceral fat can, under chronic cortisol elevation, actively promote it. This is the paradox at the center of OMAD: maximum autophagy, maximum growth hormone, maximum fat oxidation potential, and simultaneously maximum cortisol exposure. Which outcome dominates depends entirely on those three details. And then there's the 2023 study published in Nutrition and Diabetes that changes how you should think about this entirely. Researchers compared OMAD directly against 3 meals per day over 8 weeks. The OMAD group lost more weight. They also lost significantly more lean mass. Their LDL cholesterol increased. The 3-meal group maintained muscle while losing similar amounts of fat over the same period. Let that land for a moment. Similar fat loss, significantly worse muscle retention, higher cardiovascular risk markers, and a dropout rate in fasting research that runs as high as 65%, meaning most people cannot sustain the protocol long enough to realize any of the long-term autophagy or longevity benefits. So here are the three details that separate the person who extracts everything OMAD can offer from the person who gets the damage without the benefit. Detail 1. When you eat. Morning OMAD and evening OMAD produce completely different hormonal profiles. Evening OMAD, eating at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., means the large insulin spike from your single meal arrives when insulin sensitivity is at its daily low. The same meal eaten in the morning produces a measurably smaller blood sugar spike because insulin sensitivity is highest in the early part of the day. Evening OMAD also compounds with the cortisol elevation from the prior 20-plus hours of fasting, meaning cortisol is at its highest exactly when you're trying to recover. Late evening OMAD eaters consistently show higher fasting blood sugar the following morning compared to early OMAD eaters. If you do OMAD, eat earlier. Not because of willpower, because the hormonal environment at noon is categorically different from the hormonal environment at 8 p.m. Detail 2. Protein distribution sailing. You cannot force 150 grams of protein through the muscle protein synthesis ceiling in a single sitting. The research is consistent on this. What you can do is maximize the ceiling. The highest quality, most rapidly absorbed protein sources, whole eggs, fish, lean meat, processed immediately at the start of your eating window, give muscle tissue the best possible chance at protein synthesis within the compressed window. The rest of the meal should follow, not precede. Eating carbohydrates before protein in an OMAD context slows the protein absorption window even further. Detail 3. The cortisol variable. Chronic stress during OMAD is a multiplier on every negative outcome in the research. Someone doing OMAD in a high-stress period, deadline pressure, sleep deprivation, anxiety, is dramatically more likely to experience the cortisol-driven muscle catabolism, abdominal fat storage, and morning glucose dysregulation that the Stoat study identified. Someone doing OMAD in a low-stress, well-slept baseline is operating in a completely different physiological context. OMAD is not a static protocol, it's a stress multiplier. It amplifies whatever state your body is already in. Before the protocol, none of this replaces medical guidance. If you have diabetes, a history of eating disorders, cardiovascular disease, are pregnant, or are over 40 with any existing metabolic condition, speak with your doctor before attempting OMAD. The Stoat study findings on blood pressure and LDL are clinically relevant for people with existing cardiovascular risk. What's been covered here is about healthy adults in a research context. The practical summary. OMAD at its best, one meal eaten in the morning or early afternoon, protein first, on a day of low stress and adequate prior sleep, with enough total calories to prevent the construction workers from dismantling load-bearing walls. Under those conditions, the growth hormone surge, the 23-hour autophagy activation, and the fat oxidation benefits are real and supported by the mechanism. OMAD at its worst, one meal eaten at 8 p.m. after a 23-hour fast driven by deadline stress and poor sleep, insulin spike into a low-sensitivity window, cortisol elevated all day, protein ceiling overwhelmed, blood sugar dysregulated by morning. Under those conditions, the research shows you can lose the same amount of fat as a 3-meal diet, while losing significantly more muscle and elevating your cardiovascular risk markers. The question was, what happens if you eat only once a day? The honest answer is, it depends on which version of OMAD you're running, and most people running it don't know which version they're in. If this changed how you think about fasting protocols, subscribe and leave a like. Now tell me in the comments, are you running OMAD and do you eat your meal in the morning or at night? Next video, the specific protocol that captures OMAD's autophagy benefits without the cortisol and muscle loss risk, and why it outperformed OMAD in the 2023 study.